I'd like to thank Professor Shiv Shareen for this very kind invitation. I was here, I think, about a year back for the honorary DSc, and coming back to ILBS is always a great occasion for me, because for me, one of my heroes in medicine is Dr. Shiv Shareen. For long, in fact, the quality of academics he's introduced into Indian gastroenterology and hepatology is unbelievable. In fact, I'm going to conferences for last 35 years in different parts of the world. You won't believe this, but I have never come out of a conference without the mention of Sareen's classification of varices. Every conference since published, I think it's probably most quoted paper. And I think this is, for me, an honor to be here, sir, in front of the august audience here. In fact, my wife doesn't generally travel with me, but when I told her I'm going to Shiv Shareen's Institute, so immediately she said, I'll come. So she accompanied me here. So she's a big fan of Shareen also. So it's not only medical people, I think a lot of lay people are fans. And recently, I think his book has sort of brought huge awareness to public on the importance of fatty liver disease, and is a topic discussion even in South India and Hyderabad. People discuss this, and that awareness has come as a big boon to all the people. So, as I said, it's a great honor, especially after you mentioned all the names of those who have been giving these orations. I feel a little humbled. I may not reach their level, but I'm thankful that I'm here. So what I did for this is, I thought I won't talk any science because we're already all the time talking science, but I'll talk something different about a journey of how we build few institutions. Again, to build in the government an institution like ILBS is a phenomena. It's not at all easy. There are different challenges when you're doing it in a private setup, in a government setup, and I know how difficult it is in the government setup. So I'll tell you the other side in the private setup, what happens, how tertiary centers are built. And we have, of course, now 4 institutions with us. The AG hospitals, the Asian Institute of Gastroenterology, the new center that's coming up in Hyderabad. These were built over several years. So just to give a little background, one of the problems of giving a talk like this is I may sound a little arrogant. I'm sorry, I'm not. I'm just trying to convey what all happened in my journey. And a lot of this journey is little luck, serendipity, I call it, and opportunities that came we grabbed. So I did my MBBS in Madras Medical College in Kannur Medical College 79, and afterwards joined Madras Medical College to do my medicine there. This was between 82 to 84. And then subsequently did gastroenterology at the PGH Chandigarh. So during my stay in Madras Medical College, I had 2 interests. One was Carol, my wife, and you can see a picture of mine here with her. We got married soon. I was a little rebellious at that time. You can see a little beard and all that, indicating you're a part of the student union. Of course, we still continue to be married. My second interest was hepatitis B virus. For some reason when I was doing, Dr. Bloomberg got the Nobel Prize for hepatitis B virus at that time. It was very fascinating. I kept reading so much into it. And that period, Professor Bloomberg actually visited Chennai, Madras at that time. And I was totally fascinated. And that's the reason why actually I took up gastroenterology. I thought this is something I should pursue. In fact, my first paper, again, this was, we didn't realize the value of Lancet at that time. I sent a paper to Lancet. This was on, you can see a vaccine protection against neonatal hepatitis B infection. So we postulated that the hepatitis B virus doesn't travel, this was not known at the time, doesn't travel through the placenta, and therefore you keep checking baby's IgM anti-HBC, you can then say whether it's transplacental or not. And it was found that it was not traveling through the placenta, and the vaccination is going to work. So Professor Sheila Sherlock, then, who was of course I think some of the hepatologists would know her, was a very famous hepatologist. She visited PJ at that time, and she had seen this paper, and she asked me, why don't you, after you finish your DM, come and join her in her work. And she said you could edit the book, and she gave me a fantastic offer. I was very tempted. But subsequently, after I finished my PG at PGI, I was influenced by Professor Jang Bahadur Dilawari into going into endoscopy. So I started going to endoscopy, and a year later, actually, I wrote back to Prof. Sheila Sherlock saying that I was changed my course. I'm interested in endoscopy. I'm doing that because I felt I was not intellectually good enough for hepatology, and endoscopy is a mechanical job, so you can do that. Several years later, in fact, I was in one of the European conferences where there's a live endoscopy workshop. And they put a very difficult CBD stone for me. I did the CBD stone, removed the stone, came out of the hall to get into the lecture room, and Professor Sheila Sherlock was standing there, going out at that time. And as soon as I entered, she just saw me up and down and said, "So at last you become a technician." She had such disdain for endoscopy. Endoscopy at that time was still not a science, it was a technical thing. Very few randomized control studies were published, whereas hepatology had already become a big science. So this was my first experience, but subsequently, of course, we'd meet sometime now and then. So after I went back to AP, Andhra Pradesh, then it was, I joined the Nizam Institute of Medical Sciences. In the Nizam Institute of Medical Sciences, we had, of course, these primitive types of endoscopy. You can see it was still, at that time, a lecture scope. You had to peep in through a lecture scope to see inside. And this was actually the then governor, Mrs. Joshi of Andhra Pradesh. She was the governor there. Her husband was having an ulcer bleed, and I was trying to show her this. She was looking through. I'm sure she didn't see what I saw, but anyway, she agreed with what I told her. And then we proceeded. So this was the ancient system, and I then moved to another center. You can still, this has become very old now, the Medinova Diagnostic Services. The reason I was very passionate about staying in Nizam's, developing the institute there, but there's a lot of problem with the government, like any other government. That's the reason why I admire Shiv for bringing up this institution like this. From the first few months itself, I realized it's extremely impossible to get things in a government setup. You'll have to have a lot of diplomacy, a lot of pyrovy, and then, of course, you have to go, and it's not so easy. So I found it very difficult because gastrointestinal endoscopy is a very technology-related specialty, and I felt that it was not developing enough because of the need to get so much of government support. So I moved out, went into Medinova, and started a private practice. And that again, by that time, you see, we already had video scopes. We had our own fluoroscopy and so on. Actually, I had a lot of hair, but unfortunately, the photographer cut it off at that point of time. So it was in days 1984, as you can see, we started developing endoscopy. And at that time, actually, in the whole country, there were only 4-5 endoscopists who were doing active therapeutic endoscopy. Dr. Dilawari in Chandigarh, Dr. Rakesh Tandon here in AIIMS, and then Krishna Rao in South India, very few people. So what happened was, because we are doing a lot of therapeutic endoscopy, people started coming in, and this was typically how our OPD would look like, people, full of people standing everywhere and so on. So I was from a very low middle class family. We had a huge need for money. When I came in, I took a risk and went into this and started making a lot of money. So I was happy. I thought that was the end of the situation. But one day when I was doing this, my father, who was a professor of pathology, who was a contemporary of Dr. Ramlinga Swami, the director of AIIMS, and ICAT, PGI, they're all close friends. He called me home one day and told me, "Son, I'm very ashamed of you." I said, "Why are you ashamed? I did PGI, DM, and I'm doing well in practice. You shouldn't be ashamed." He said, "I'm ashamed because what have you done? You're okay." He was a very traditional man who felt he had published 400 papers by that time, and he had done, in academic circles, did very well. He was a vice chancellor, professor and all. So he told me, you have failed in life. I said, "Why did I fail?" "Because have you published anything? Have you trained anybody? Have you built an institution? And are you doing any research?" For all this, my answer was no, I'm not doing. So he said, "That is failure." And he was right. I was successful in terms of making money, but I had failed in other account. It is then I decided that I'll change track, that I'll do something which may contribute a little to the society and stop the practice part. In fact, at that point of time, I was making so much money, but my wife was getting irritated with me seeing all the suitcases. You never know when the tax guy will come and get into you. So I decided at that point, let's change suit. We thought we should set up a institute, but unfortunately, that wasn't still enough for an institute. Then something happened in my life, which is the first serendipity or accident that happened that helped me. And this was, I was at the Medinov at that time, and I got a call from the neighboring chief minister saying that his wife had a laparoscopic cholecystectomy done in the afternoon. Middle of the night, one of the stone slipped into the CBD. She developed severe cholangitis, and the doctors there could not, ERCP was still not a big technology by that time, they're not able to remove it. So he said, can you come and help? So I took, he sent a private jet, we took all the equipment also from Medinova, flew to this place, and I went in. And when I went in, this lady in the hospital, she was in a big private hospital, was actually gasping. No pulse, no BP, gasping. Maybe she had 1 or 2 hours to live. And outside the hospital, there were about 2,000 political gundas, white khadar shirts and all that, standing there. So I knew that if something happened, that will be the end of not only my career but also life. So the first thing I asked the director of the hospital, can you show me the exit door the other side? If something happens, I should be able to. So then fortunately what happens is this was an impacted stone. We made a small cut and removed the stone. A lot of pus came out. This was 2 o'clock in the morning. Next day morning, 6 o'clock, the CM came thinking that he'll have to hear some bad news and all that. He came in and he saw that his wife was sitting and eating breakfast there. She was totally shocked. He said, if such a technology is there, why it is not there? And I said, you come here. So he called the Revenue Secretary, Education. So everybody asked, gave us land, said you should start it. But I told him, look, I'm interested in going back to Hyderabad, and that's why I came back from PGI. So I'd like if you can help us there. So that's how we got our first hospital, the Asian Institute of Gastroenterology. One of his chelas had a hotel being built there. He just called him and told him to give off to these doctors. So the first hospital we got was a donation, courtesy his kindness because of this. So this was actually a 200, this was in 1990, it was a 250 bed hospital, and I was told at that time, why are you guys taking up a whole hospital for gastroenterology? Gastroenterology, small specialty. You take part of it, give it out to orthopedics, this and that. I said, no, let's try because we don't have any capital investment. Things came free, so we'll do it. So we started this. And this was the first hospital, Asian Institute. It looks still like one of those castles and all because the old hotel building that we could take. So we started with a mission statement of compassion, academic excellence, and so on, health and training. And we had a small group of staff initially. So what we did is we planned to divide our work into 3 categories: 1/3 for service, 1/3 for teaching, and 1/3 for research. And similarly, the patients were coming, 1/3 were subsidized, 1/3 was paying, and 1/3 were free. So this is a concept. We knew that if we are not going to practice, take salaries depending on how the institute does. Sometimes it can be very low, sometimes it can be okay. Then we will make this successful. And we started different departments. At that time, genetics and pharmacotherapy was still very, very new. Of course, our main concentration was in interventional endoscopy. So we got a staff together who were interested in similar concepts. Some of them you'll recognize here. We have about 25 medical gastroenterologists, 25 surgical gastro. We had our own pathologists, radiologists, and so on. So it is a fully gastro hospital, totally gastroenterology. And we, of course, went in very quick into different procedures, got the for example, the capsule we managed to get for India first time in 20 itself, and several things that came. So the reason why we rapidly became successful in this hospital was because gastro as an isolated hospital was not thought of till then. So it immediately attracted attention, and all over the country were getting referrals for this gastro hospital. It was a one-stop destination. Patients' volume were high, and the most important thing is that we kept our care costs very low. We knew that this is the famous Prahlad statement, the bottom of the pyramid is very important. Because if you keep your costs low, you get more turnover, and then what happens is your doctors get more experienced, you get a better variety of pathology and so on. I think a philosophy which you have here. And all our staff were full-time salaried with a low salary. In fact, at that point of time, our salaries were lower than the other institutions that were there. And we developed this concept of patient first, whether it's a janitor, whether it's a nurse, doctor, everybody our universe was around the patient. Everybody was around the patient. So we managed to get another group of more doctors, and again this happened to our hospital. So the hospital again, the OPDs got crowded, full. It was sometimes, even if I didn't wear a white coat and went in, they were not allowing me in, saying that you are pushing in so many patients waiting and so on. So on one of the instances, our then Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, Mr. Nageshwar Reddy, came to the hospital to get a checkup, and unfortunately he didn't have that big security thing, didn't inform anybody. And when he came in, he was almost pushed out. They were not allowing him to come in. So he finally met me and said, "What are you doing here? What are you running this mad rush? I'll give you land. I'll give you land. Why don't you build the world's best hospital?" So I said, "World's best we can't, but at least I'll do an attempt to do, in my opinion, the world's best endoscopy unit, because that's my passion." So he gave us a land of about 10 acres in fairly good part of the city. But you can see, as we are building this hospital that was coming up at that time, you can see the surrounding area is also developing. You see that? Tall buildings were coming up. This is called the Gachbowli area of Hyderabad, which was very undeveloped when we started this hospital 2018. But slowly, as we built, you started seeing that the surrounding area was also becoming very busy, a lot of high-rise building coming up. So this hospital actually we made into two blocks. One was the clinical block, which is, you can see here, and the other was the research block. And our concentration was mainly on endoscopy. We decided we'll build the best endoscopy center in the world. So we have 1 lakh square feet with 30 endoscopy rooms and so on. One of the things we realized as we went into practice is the practice of medicine was changing. When we started Asian Institute of Gastroenterology 20 years back, to the pure gastroenterology specialty. But when we went into this hospital, we realized that specialty has changed completely, that we're now seeing more and more patients with multi-organ disorders. We used to, 30, we had the patient coming with CBD stone, you remove the stone, send him out. But now we are seeing 80-year-old patient on antiplatelet agents, on anticoagulants, coming with the CBD stone. So we require support from cardiologists, hematologists. So we realized the practice of medicine in our country has changed completely. We require now a multi-speciality approach. It's very difficult to go. That's the reason why we now have about 36 specialties in our hospital of different things, and many of our cases are now become a multi-speciality case where we take help of cardiologists. Sometimes when we're doing ERCP, patient having say heart block, the cardiologist is there helping us and so on. The other thing we did was we decided that we should also be very strong in training. So we developed this large clinical skill lab, where we now have probably one of the most used areas in our hospital, where we have, this is our endoscopy animal training center, where we can get both large animals, live animals, tissues and so on. And these stations are all linked together in a good way, so a single person can actually monitor the whole training. We also were fortunate to get a small animal lab with transgenic animals and all that for us basic scientists to work in this area. So 2 of these labs we have here. I think animal lab became very important because, as you can see here, every weekend now it's occupied, because we're getting large number of youngsters getting training in endoscopy. They come and we train them, and this is becoming a very used area. In fact, now we are contracting it out to companies like Boston, Olympus and all that. They get people from Singapore, Hong Kong and so on to get trained here. It's cheaper for them than contracting it from outside. So this is how we are using it more. We also build these large studios where endoscopy procedures done could be transmitted to anywhere in the world or received to anywhere in the world. So now again this has become very busy. Every week we do 1 live endoscopy course to some part of the world, Korea, Japan, US and so on. So I think this is one of the investments we made. In fact, this studio and its connectivity was built by CNN. And when they built it, the cost of just this area was equivalent to the cost of our whole old hospital. But I think it's a good investment because we realized the importance. So we also realized that it's very important, and again, inspiration from Professor Shiv Sharin, that translational research becomes very important. So we started this Center for Translational Research, where basic scientists and some of our clinicians are working together to create this. And then this has grown now. I think our biobank person actually was trained here with ILBS, and then he has joined us. We now have Professor Barry Marshall's Research Center, H. pylori, a lot of fundamental work is doing. In fact, Barry Marshall has has become a part of our faculty, advising us on H. pylori research. In fact, we have 2 Nobel Prize winners in the faculty now in our institute, and that has been one of the positive things. We have also very largely concentrated on the pancreas research, islet cell research. This is one of the largest Wellcome Trust DBT research project, which has been funded by them, crores of rupees, which is given to work on islet cell and islet cell, Eisenhower cell, crosstalks and things like that. Very fundamental research. We have about 10 PhDs, basic scientists working in this area. I think Shiv has seen some of these areas and blessed us with his thoughts. But one of the important thing I found that we used to think when we started this that it's very difficult to build a research culture and funding in a private setup. One of the reasons is, and of course you are in Delhi, you won't realize it, but for people in South, it is very difficult to access funds from ICMR or DBT. Not that they're biased, but because we don't have the networking potential. So you will be seeing the secretary of DBT or somebody as a patient immediately. It's very easy. But for us, it's impossible. Right? So we decided the only way to get these funds is from private donors. So we established a large pool of private donors who have given us huge amount of funds now. Many of them are actually software companies. But we have Hemsley, New York, which is a Jewish organization, which has given us huge funds. The only center outside Israel they have given us is we were able to network and get. Similarly, Wellcome Trust has given us a lot of funds. So I think we decided, research in India in private, and I think even now in government setup has to be done with private funding. We cannot depend on government funding. There's so much of CSR funding, so much that's there that can be used for doing this. And of course, the basis of a hospital before and now has been clinical services, research and training, and community service. So this is another important thing I learned, that if we build our institution isolated from the community and start doing things, you don't get the well-wishes of the community. And this becomes very important in setups like ours, very required. So we started this rural program where we send our vans out into villages. We are now adapted 140 villages. They go out, they do all types of procedures, endoscopy, colonoscopy, the people registered. From there, we start getting all the endoscopy videos into our system, and then, of course, we can look at them. And this has been a great experience, not only because the villages are getting completely free service, we have their well-wishers, the society looks at us with a kinder eye, but also I think our residents love this. They get so much practice doing so many. So this is a great experience for us. So what happened is, from 2022 to now, every year, the Newsweek has been labeling us as one of the best hospitals in the world. So when our Chief Minister so many years back told us that you should do this, I never believed we could. But I think it's been, as I said, a lot of serendipity, luck that happened, opportunities. So build up this place, and we have a great team. And I think one of the things that I also admire, whenever Shiv Sharin gives a talk, he has his team member who has done that paper there, photo of him. And this is absolutely true. I think it's only the teams that make the people, not us. So we had a dream. We dreamt in our subconscious mind that we should build an institution like this. And as we dream, sometimes it becomes a reality. But I think it was a serendipity, as I say, luck or whatever it was, how the first time I was called Chief Minister's wife, we got the first building donation. Second building, the Chief Minister was not allowed to get into the hospital, and how he gave us this large land. So there's a lot of serendipity involved. So I think, just to again say that it's impossible to suddenly think of a great thing occurring. I think it's small things that come by series of small things, as Wango said, which results in the final output. So just briefly, in next 5-10 minutes, what the lessons I learned as we build these institutions in terms of leadership, team building. Some of you youngsters here may want to emulate what Shiv Sharin has done, build institutions and so on. So some of these lessons that I learned, the hard way, I thought I'll let you know. First of all, leadership is walking the tightrope. You have to sometimes be very strict, but sometimes you have to be very soft with employees. It's a very thin line. Sometimes you have to be dismissive, because if you're sitting in office, all sorts of people will be coming and trying to give you this complaint, this gossip, that gossip. You have to dismiss all this, but sometimes you have to be appreciative. Some death occurred in the employee's family, you have to be very appreciative of that. You have to be sometimes disconnected, you have to look that you're disconnected above everybody else, but empathy is very important. You have to be empathetic with you. The 3 things I never learned before, which I thought was very important as I made this journey was to thank people. Every day now, there's at least a group of people, some people, many times you say thank you. I'm also sorry many times, because sometimes we make mistakes in assessment and you realize that you scolded somebody for a wrong reason and you realize it was a mistake. Always very important. When you say sorry, they feel more happy than when you say thank you, because they feel. The last thing is what we found is this: what do you think? This is what we have learned, very important. When we want to do something like take a new consultant, make a new building, get new equipment, we always ask our consultant, what do you think? And again, that we get all sorts of opinions. And when you sit back and think all these opinions, and then you can make a correct judgment. Otherwise, by yourself, you would have made a wrong assessment. So this is something which I learned. I was actually a president of the World Endoscopy Organization for 4 years. It's a big organization, 160 countries. They have a huge secretariat. I was very young, naive. I didn't know how to run it. I was thrust into this because of some reasons. And then the first time some problem occurred, I called one of the staff, had to call and make a little shouting. And then the secretary of the secretariat, very wise lady, she told me, "Doctor, I'll teach you one thing. There's a special way to scold people, and if you do that, it's very effective. It's called the sandwich technique." Now, what's the sandwich technique? If you call in somebody who's done a problem or a fault, you call that person, first praise him, you're doing good work and all, and the next you start blasting him. This is what you done, this is what all you want to abuse, you abuse. And then follow it up as he's going back to say, okay, you've done this, but keep up the good work. So I found this sandwich technique very effective. It's very effective. So you just don't scold people, you do it. They don't even realize at a point of time that they're being scolded. The second is team building. This is again very, very important. In fact, very long back, I had dinner once with Mr. Narayan Murthy, who built Infotech. So I asked Mr. Narayan Murthy, what is the reason? He's one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country. What is the reason for your success? Can you tell me in one sentence? I always ask every successful person this: what in one sentence you tell me? In Narayan Murthy said, I don't want one sentence. I want only one word. And the word is team. He was absolutely right. Team is the reason for his or anybody's success. So, as Henry Ford famously said, coming together is the beginning, keeping together is progress, but working together is success. When we work together, only then we can. So, all the successes that we had at AAG is because of our team, contributing in different ways. Some huge contributions, some minor, but everybody contributing, right from our paramedical staff, nursing staff, doctors, and so on. Because when going through this journey, I noticed that there are three kinds of people. People who make things happen, they're the doers. In all the groups you have this. Second is people who can watch things happen, they're watching, appreciating. And third is people who wonder what happened, how did ILBS come up so suddenly? Shiv Sharin's classmate may be seeing him after 20 years and say, how did it come up suddenly? So they're wondering, it's actually the doers who do the real success. It's very, very important. And that's the reason why I think it's very important as an administrator, as a leader, to surround yourself with positive people. So in our group, if you have a negative people, we try and get him out or make him positive. Otherwise, negative people influence the whole group in such a way, and negativity comes in. So this is very important. So success is not is an accident, it's a result of an attitude. If you think you can, you can. If you think you cannot, you cannot. That's you say I can't do this, you cannot. That's okay. You're right both ways. But I think success comes only to those who think you can. And again, as I said, it's a team which is responsible for the whole this. In fact, we now have about 500 consultants, all of them extremely qualified, super specialty and all that. That's the reason why all our success is because of this. Now, just briefly for 2 minutes, I'll talk to you on something which college has never taught me, which I think is very important for all the youngsters to know. You'll never learn this in any school or any college or anywhere. This is entrepreneurship and managing money. This is very important because this is, I think, something that you're never taught in your training. How to manage people, how to do entrepreneurship, and how to manage money. Because you have to manage, if you have too much money, you have to manage that. If you don't have money, you have to manage. Both ways you have to manage. So, as a young doctor, you should know how to do these things. This is very important. So, when we build this institution, the last one, which is a big one, of course, when you build a, say, 2,000 crore institution, you require inputs also from so-called what I call private equity people. Now, private equity people are people who invest money into an institution, and so you don't have to borrow from banks. So you don't have that tension of giving back. But also private equity people are like vultures, looking to see when you become successful so they can grab onto that, make money. So you have the good ones, the bad ones, the ugly ones, all types of ones. So when you're going through this pathway, you have to negotiate very carefully to see that. So one of the important advices that I learned was that you can't do it as well. Doctors were very bad. We don't have any knowledge. Best is to get a friendly advisor who knows this economics. He may be related to you or a friend to you or somebody. I think about finances, all of us as doctors or staff working in these institutions should have an advisor, because we can't manage our finances. Because in fact, the first thing this man asked me, the private equity person, is what is your EBITDA? I didn't know what was EBITDA. I don't know anything about it. What is the RPOP? What is the ALOS? I knew nothing. I didn't even know how to read a balance sheet. A few years back, I didn't even know how to. So EBITDA is earnings before tax and depreciation. RPOP is revenue per occupied bed. I know these are not very important to you because you have other things, but ALOS is average length of stay. But even for a hospital like ILBS, ALOS becomes important, because I didn't realize this, that ALOS is inversely proportionate to how effective your hospital is in terms of money management. If you have ALOS, that is average length of stay of, which in United States is 2.5 days, then your hospital money management is very good. But if you have an ALOS of 7 days, you're not doing well. So we used to have 5 days, we have now come to 3.5 days. So these type of statistics we never imagine as doctors is very important. There's certain science behind all this. And similarly, I never knew things like how much loan you can take. There are very specific rules in that. Only 1/3 of the costing you take as a loan, how to give repayment, what is the receivables. What happens is many companies get things done from the hospital. They'll say we'll pay you, but they'll take 30 days, 45 days, 60 days. It's very important to have a good overview of how this is happening and keep a watch on that. How much salary, we didn't even know what salary we should pay to. For you, it's easy. You have government scales, All India Institute pays so much, this pays so much, so you pay. But for us, in a sector like a private sector, it's very variable. There may be a junior doctor who's paid much higher than a senior doctor because he's getting in more patients, revenues, and so on. It's a lot of variability there. All this knowledge I didn't have till we get what it is. And finally, people think that a busy hospital is doing well economically. That's not right. Hospital's income or how it does financially is not related to how busy it is. It's related to the diagnostic tests that are done then and the pharma. They give 50% and 60% of the revenue. The operations give very little. So even if you do, say, we do 700 endoscopies a day in a hospital, we are not making money on that. We are in fact losing or marginal. What hospitals gain from is from the pharmacy and from the diagnostic tests that are done. So this is an important knowledge, And finally, again, so we moved, and I think Rajat Gupta, one of the McKinsey's president, came to us once, and again I asked him, what is the reason for your success? And he gave me a very important thought that he had at that time. That what he said was that whenever he reached a comfort zone, he'd raise the bar higher. So he has to go above that bar. So that was important message. We all reach comfort zones very quickly. We are having practice, you do well, okay, you continue like that. You build an institution, you continue like that. But all the time you have to keep raising a bar to higher level, next level. You publish 200 papers, you feel, I've done very well. No, that's not. You raise your bar to 300, raise the bar to 400. I think raising this bar becomes very important. So I always tell our students that what you must do is to have SMART goals. What do SMART goals make? That you must be very specific what you want to do. It must be measurable. It should be achievable. It should be realistic and time bound. Today you can't sit here and say, I'll become Dr. Shiv Shareen next month. It cannot happen. It has to be very achievable. It has to be specific, saying, okay, this next year I'm going to publish 20 papers in a high index journals. It has to be realistic also, that is done. So I think, and time bound. These are very important goals that we have to, and as you go along the way. But also it's very important to have a realistic ambition. I told you earlier, don't dream too much about what you can do it in steps. And responsible risks. This is something I didn't know earlier. I took a big risk because when we started the first hospital, I had actually 35,000 rupees coming back from PGI. And one of the politicians who came to see me, I was in Nizams at that time, was standing for election. He asked me, can you give me some loan? I said, I have only 35,000. He said, you give me 30,000, after the election I'll pay you back. So I gave him 30,000, I never saw him again. So I was left at 5,000 that time, and I took a big risk because we were, in fact, my wife used to take my kid in a bus, sometimes walk, because we didn't have even money to get. So it was so I took irresponsible risk, but looking back now, I think it's very important to be careful and take only responsible risks for the sake of your families. If you're doing well in a particular pace, just see that whether it's worthwhile the risk to change in that. And finally, during this journey, I had many, many failures. What I realized that is failure is never final. This is like a simple thing, like you send a paper to a journal, you send it to New England Journal, it rejects. That's not failure. And then you send it to Lancet, rejects. That's not failure. You send it to gastroenterology, it will accept finally. So what happens is failure, I think, is like a stepping stone, they say, but failure is like a toll gate. It may be closed, but there's side pathways going, and you can join the main road after some time. So, yeah. So this is something which is very important. So finally, I think from this journey, I believe we went through a very chancey, a world with a lot of luck, opportunity, chances. The only important thing is that whenever a chance came, we grabbed it. We didn't leave the chance. When the CM offered just 10 acres of land, I could have thought, oh, why get into all this? Asian Institute of Gastro doing well, why not we continue? And then we got this. Now we are going further down. We are building 4 blocks, huge blocks, similar blocks around the hospital. We are getting a proton therapy unit. We are getting a separate transplant unit. We have separate cardiac. So keep on grabbing the opportunities and growing. That's only, I think it's very important. And these opportunities sometimes not very obvious. Again, for those of you, a friend of you may say there's a small piece of land somewhere near outside Delhi, you want to take it. You'll say, why get into all this? But that may be a great opportunity to take this. So I think you have to watch out for opportunities. They'll come and grab these opportunities. So formula for building a responsible healthcare institution, wherever you are, in whichever sector, I think is, first is that serendipity and luck plays a huge role. Whenever you get this, grab it. Very important. Second important thing is, everybody says work hard, then only you'll succeed. I work 18 hours a day, but I'm not working hard. The trick is, I'll ask you not to work hard, juniors. Work smart. Now, what is smart? Work smart is you make your work enjoyable, then it becomes smart work. So I'm not working 18 hours a day, I'm enjoying 18 hours a day. Every endoscopy picture that I see when I'm doing endoscopy is a picture of some movie coming there. Every patient I talk to, the history is a story which is very, very interesting. Nowadays I'm spending more time talking to the patient because I find it so interesting how they came from the place, what is their social problems, what happened. It becomes extremely interesting when you're spending your time. So work smart, and that's important. Of course, finally, it's team and communication that makes a huge difference. Unless you have a proper team like you have here, you communicate well, and then only you get success. And the last thing I want to tell you is this, that this always has been my philosophy of life. I'm telling you this because I probably failed in this, partly. Life is like having 2 balls, a glass ball and rubber ball. A rubber ball, if you put it down, it will come back again. It won't. Whereas a glass ball, if you put it down, it will break. So rubber ball is like work. Even if something happens, you always get it back again. The glass ball is like family, friends, and health. If you lose it, you'll never get it back again. So that's the reason why I ask you all to think deeply about this, to put your goals, your ambitions at one stage, to balance it with what you're doing in your life in terms of family, friends, and health. And I think ultimately it's what each person has as his goals, as his vision, that ultimately becomes the most important thing. Again, thank you very much for giving this opportunity.